My dear friends, the first encounter that we have is something that places in the context of where we're coming from and where we're going. This new year comes as an unopened package. Only this morning, because Father John asked me to go up to Bellewstown to celebrate on the hill, or really a mountain, at 9 o'clock, I was passing O'Neill. O'Neill's is the centre of gravity of our little village, and it's also the point of return, or if you prefer, no return, because he is the one who receives all the bodies of our town. They go first of all to Drogheda, where they are washed and embalmed, and they come back ready for the wake, where people for a good while are able to see the loved face and say their goodbye. That's actually quite important. In England that doesn't happen in the same way, and death is not faced. It's very hygienic. One needs to have that last encounter with the person. In Italy it was actually quite dramatic. They would cling on to the coffin and so on while you were trying to do the burial, wailing and all the rest of it. But people there are better at it. They express their emotions, whereas sometimes holding them in can be negative. So, as I passed, there was actually in front the hearse with a coffin inside, and I was wondering whether there was a body or not in the coffin. And it made me think, some years ago, the whole village had got together and done a very strange film. It's actually on YouTube. It's only about 5 minutes long, but it was most bizarre. But in its own way, it said it all. They got all the goodwill of the area, all ages, great and small. They dressed them up accordingly, and they had a funeral procession coming in to the village graveyard, the old one where I live. But because the old Anglican church by now is a restaurant, the Spire, they had invented this bizarre scene whereby at the other side was coming in a cortege for the wedding reception. And they put these two extremes together in such a way that it made us see life that small. Just married was the caption on the car going out with confetti being showered at it. And just deceased was on the other with a rose being thrown at it. And the in-between was what we're at. Now, in the course of this year, maybe someone that we know will no longer be there by the end. And it's not necessarily the person that we think. One day, not long ago, it was happening not far from here. There was a funeral there, and the men of the village were saying, I wonder which one of us will be next. And they were calculating, it should be so-and-so. And it wasn't at all. Not at all. It was one of the others who was saying that. Now, it's kind of important that we look at this fact in the eye. Look at this. That is a clock, a watch, a waistcoat watch, similar to the one that my grandfather would have worn on a Sunday morning. And although it's exactly as they would have been, it's actually quite modern because it works on quartz, hence it stopped. The battery has run out. And our battery one day will run out. And what will happen? All will stop at that last heartbeat. Now we know from those who've gone there and come back on the operating theatre what happens. It dawns on them progressively that they're changing dimension. They come out of the body often with relief because of the pain, and they're looking down upon it. And they have a strange sensation. That looks a bit like me. And then they start moving. And it's because the presence is still there for a while that one still anoints a person. It happened to me not long ago, actually. I got 1 minute too late. So one does it under condition, mentally conditioning the anointing. Si vivis, if you are alive, or si capaces, if you are able. Because there is perhaps, who knows, the soul around still at that point. But eventually, it has to go on. But it's already in a fixed state. Even one fraction of a second after that departure from the body, it is fixed. Nothing ever again can change in the baggage that it's carrying. Ever! No more than 1 million years later, one fraction of a second fixes it. Hence the importance, if you're ever in contact with somebody in that state of being there, if you possibly can, getting a priest, and at least making sure that you're talking about the right things, not the weather. Because all hell is breaking loose at that point. The devils want the soul, and they try hard. Now, one day, I was talking to a nurse who worked with people dying. It was an old people's home, and many died in her hands. And she put it this way: mine is the last face that they see before they go on. I hand them on to God. And she hoped that it would be, next of all, his face that they would see. But one day she told me this: last night a person died. And she told me more. This person, Lena was her name, was completely deaf and blind by the end. She had no communication. But there was one person in her life, I think it was a cousin, who had always remained faithful. And somehow they had a communication between each other. You can do a lot sometimes holding a hand. Now, she didn't know it, but this cousin died. And she suddenly sat up and opened up her blind eyes. And the comment was, from the matron of the place, they were seeing eyes. She was looking at someone, and the staff felt that this cousin, the only one, was coming to get her. And on she went. And it seems that that sometimes happens when people who have been there and back in these near-death experiences, that they sense that loved ones are waiting for them. Interesting that there's a reunion on the beyond. And so they start moving. And there is real motion. It's difficult for us to understand how there can be motion in the world of spirits, because they're immaterial. But just as here, in a few seconds we will have a huge crowd of moving angels, perhaps increasing as the consecration comes near. And as we carry the Blessed Sacrament around, there will be angels moving around with us. Huge numbers, probably. Therefore, spirits move. We call it the gift of agility. They move from A to B with the speed of thought. Hence, you can send your guardian angel here and there. You can meet your parents through your guardian angel if you can't find them, and so on. So they move. And if you look at some of these MBs, there are some things in common. If they're going in the right direction, the movement is sort of okay, even though they might have a rough ride before ending in the right place. But, and it's a huge but, and it's the only but that counts. So think about it right now before time comes this year. For all those that you know who aren't praying. Those who go on into the beyond in that state of fundamental refusal of grace, of bad will, of rejection of all the proposals of grace and mercy from on high, and they're out there. Those souls, against the desire of their Maker, have to go away. They can't face Him. And the reason is this: if they go towards God, they will be burnt by His majesty. So they have to. And by their own instinct, they go as far as possible. To where? The other direction. And it's a downward movement. The saints too, who have seen the beyond, even Fatima, they know it's a downward movement. Our Blessed Lady opened up the earth and it was down. And she was warning us, it's a real danger. All these soldiers dying just like that, one after the other, like fleas in the First World War, they were going somewhere. And she was trying to warn them, you can save these. And she added this clause after each decade of the Rosary, save us from the fires of hell. And also, remember the power of your sacrifices. These children could save souls by the thousand, and they did do a lot in regard to penance, sacrifices, and prayer for sinners. And this prayer was given to them. Oh my Jesus, it is for love of you, and so on. And that was part of it, the salvation of sinners. So, they move down. Now look, what is down? We think it's mythical. But the earth, too, corresponds to that. Anyone who has gone into ecstasy, what do? They rise. You look down, and even scientifically, down. The furthest point that we can get in this planet is the bottom of the big oceans, the big ones. They're pretty close to the end of the crust. There's only about a mile between water and what is underneath when it starts to get liquid. And things have been going on there. They know from deep boring operations that there are things going on which are not explicable at that level of the earth. Things escape. Huge quantities of terrible heat. And, wait for it, unknown creatures that can eat and devour steel. Hideous. Does that sound familiar? This is science. So, what am I saying? This downward movement is actually to that realm. It's physical in the spiritual world. So, just think, 1 second after closing one's eyes and coming out, if one is finding that, it's big trouble. They can't do a thing. They've got to follow their gravity. Do you see how hard it is for the guardian angel who sees his ward going the wrong way after all the efforts he's made? Now this, my friends, is what we should be thinking about towards the beginning of the year. Not just Old Lang Syne and all that goes with it, Guinness by the gallon. There is joy, yes, but only for those who are going home. So I just finish. This is stuck. And the devil once was asked in exorcism, what is hell? And he just replied, it is now. Adesso. Italian. Un adesso sempre. Ferma. Ever stuck. So, time goes on. This is working very well. Quartz again. Well, we've got it. Use and consecrate every second. For 1 second can mean all eternity. For one soul, right now, perhaps is going the wrong way unless you make a sacrifice.
for him.